Blog Talk Radio.
The recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
You're listening to the Hype Biz Wrestling on Blog Talk Radio and the Stitcher app. The Hype Biz Wrestling, hosted by Adam MainMan Carey, offering opinions, insight, and exclusive interviews from around the world of professional wrestling. Want to call in and share an opinion? The number is 646-200-0999. That's 646-200-0999. Want more Hype Is Wrestling? Visit our website at hypeisradio.com and like us on Facebook at Hype Is Wrestling Radio. Now, here is your host, Adam MainMan Carey.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adam MainMan Carey here. Hype Is Wrestling Radio, the second show on the Hype brand. Again, folks, going to be a great show. Taking your call, 646-200-0999. A little later on, we're going to start this show really as a chance to look back at ECW. Obviously, we're having a former ECW referee and original Jim Molineaux on today to talk about ECW and some of the great things that happened at ECW, but I'm also he's going to be on probably in about 10 minutes. I'm going to take the time, obviously, to look at ECW as a whole here and talk a little bit about it, because if you're like me, ECW really affected your viewing habits and, in return, really affected my career in the wrestling business. So ECW meant a lot of different things to a lot of people. A lot of people didn't like ECW for what it stood for. They thought it was garbage wrestling. So I'm interested to hear Jim Molineaux's take, because not only is Jim Molineaux one of those referees that was really in ECW pretty much his whole career, but he was also a very good referee, and I think he's got a lot to say about how to referee as well as his time in ECW. I also want to remind people before Jim Molineaux comes on, folks, go to oldtimewrestling.net as his website. They got some big shows coming up. May 11th at 2 p.m. there's a Fan Appreciation Day, and May 18th, 2 o'clock at 7 p.m., they're having a Soul Survivor match. So it's going to be a great show. Actually, both those shows, to be perfectly honest with you. I would love to actually get up there for those. So Old Time Wrestling, and if you know anything about Old Time Wrestling, you know they put on some tremendous cards. So make sure you go to oldtimewrestling.net, and we'll discuss that a little bit more with him when he comes on. However, while I'm on the topic of ECW, I wanted to talk about whenever I first discovered ECW, because you don't just really, back in the day, ECW wasn't on every TV. It's not like ECW was there. You just turned it on and found it. I was lucky enough here in Florida where it came on the Sunshine Network. And you turn on the Sunshine Network, and all of a sudden it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'll never forget seeing it on the program guide, trying to figure out what is this wrestling I've never seen. You know, you have the characters at this point, 96, I think it was, 97 when I discovered them. You have the characters that existed in the WWF at the time, and WCW for the most part. Now you turn on ECW, and one thing that always struck me about ECW is the fact that ECW grabbed you right from the very beginning. ECW was one of those shows, you watched the video, the opening montage, if you will. It really just, it made you want to watch more. You're sort of thinking, what in the hell have I gotten myself into? As a kid, I'm 30 years old now, but as a kid at this point, I'm in my teen years at this point, I was terrified as to what I watched, because this business I always wanted to be a part of, this business that I saw as your Midnight Expresses, your Hulk Hogan's, Ric Flair's, Arn Anderson's, you name them, Ricky Steamboat, Jake Roberts. Now I'm watching this product that's on my TV where guys are getting hit by kendo sticks. I never forget watching that opening montage where the Sandman is wailing on, I don't remember who it was, but he was wailing on somebody with a kendo stick. And my brain just couldn't fathom what I was seeing. ECW had all that. And once you actually watched the product, yeah, it was raw, but would ECW have been the same if it wasn't just a raw bingo hall type smoke-filled arena everywhere they went? I don't think so. You combine violence, we combine with the attitude of ECW. And I do say attitude because I still feel like the WWE, WWF ripped off Heyman. I mean, and people will argue me that, but I'll tell you right now, if you really look back at the way things went down, of course Vince raided Heyman's talent, and quite honestly, I'm surprised he didn't raid some of his referees, because you had guys like Jim Molineaux, Finnegan, all these referees who were there. John Finnegan, Molineaux and Finnegan were probably two of the best referees in the 90s wrestling. And, of course, when Alfonso went there, I believe Alfonso started out reffing for him, and then he became a manager. I'm shocked that some of the personnel that was on Heyman's staff didn't get rated as well. So, it's really interesting to think about also, though. You talk about Jim Molineaux being a great referee. Think about the kind of refereeing he had to do. Think about what he had to put up with. While the kind of wrestling that I'm used to in the business of the independents, you try to acknowledge the rules, you try to admonish the rules, and you treat the referee like he is the only real authoritative figure in that match. Now, all of a sudden, you're tossing all that out the door, and the referee is now a bigger part of the show than any other place. Many different matches, I could say. If the referee wasn't there at ECW, the match itself wouldn't have felt like it did. So we're going to talk about some of the greatest guys that ever came through ECW. Obviously, Jim Molineaux worked ECW One Night Stand, and he worked a great matchup as a referee. It was Masato Tanaka and Mike Awesome. And I believe he took a powerbomb in that match. I believe so. I'm interested to hear what he has to say about that. He'll be on any second now, folks. Again, before he comes on here, you can like us on Facebook, Hype is Wrestling Radio. Just search us out. We split from the Hype is Here brand. Hype is Here is our first show we do. It's a comedy current events show. Check us out. Me and Gary Carp, my partner, we do a pretty good job over there. So if you want to check that out, it is available on demand, all our shows. Again, folks, ECW to me, really ECW, well, let's be honest, ECW really got me to start in the wrestling business in a lot of ways. You go to a local show, I'd watched ECW for a while, and I wanted to get in the business. So Hack Myers, former ECW alum, was working organization, I believe it was Renegade Championship Wrestling in this area, North Florida, where I'm at. So I go up to Hack Myers as a kid and say, Hack, I want to get in the wrestling business. First I asked him, when are you coming back to ECW? The original Mark question. When are you going to do this, do that? And, of course, he put me off and said, I'll be back this week, because everybody wants to stay in that spotlight. You had guys who always wanted to stay in the spotlight. Kind of like the guys who were going back and forth doing reunion shows for ECW still. But Hack never wound up back at ECW. Instead, Hack that day gave me a phone number to call and said, hey, kid, take this phone number. It's a place to train. Give them a call, and they'll get you in touch with somebody. And it had to be a rib, because when I called that number, it was none other than Dusty Rhodes himself. He gave me Dusty Rhodes' private number. I was humiliated. I was mortified. So that was 98, I think. 98 or 99. So Jim Molineaux on the show here soon, folks. If you got a question while Jim's coming on, 646-200-0999. I'll take a quick caller. I thought about doing a DVD giveaway as well. I may do that, depending on how much time we have left once we're done. Depends also how many live listeners. We've been having problems with the chat room. If y'all have problems getting in the chat room, let me know. Remember, you can hear us on the Stitcher app as well, so Stitcher actually works a little better sometimes. I don't know why that is. We've been having all kinds of problems with Blog Talk. In fact, somebody hacked our website recently, so the website's down as well. So hopefully we'll have all that fixed up and everything transitioned for you guys here soon. I was watching a match the other day, speaking of ECW. I was watching a match the other day. I really think I enjoyed ECW the most, probably 97, 98. Everybody wants to point back in 95 when you had Guerrero and you had Dean Malenko, Psychosis, all those guys around there. But to me, it was late 90s. I mean, I was watching a match the other day, and you know what? Let me say this much. I don't want to offer too much, but ECW was great because every time you turned it on, you never knew who was going to walk through that door. So without further ado, I believe Jim's on the line here. Ladies and gentlemen, former ECW original, and in my opinion, probably one of the best referees to ever be in the business, Jim Molineaux. Mr. Molineaux, you there, sir?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. How are you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
I'm phenomenal. First off, I wanted to say thank you for coming on Hype is Wrestling Radio. It's always a pleasure.
And thank you for the intro. I appreciate that. You embarrass me by saying I'm the best. There's a lot of guys who had done what I did years and years before I even stepped in a ring. So I always look at those guys before I even think of myself.
Well, and but I mean that though, because you worked with a lot of different guys, a lot of different characters, but you worked in such an environment to where you really had to be on your toes. And you know, I go back to guys like Dick Worley, who were great referees. You know, and even Randy Pee Wee Anderson, guys that I admired in the wrestling business before I got involved. But when I watched guys like you and John Finnegan actually working in ECW, you realize real quick that once you get in the business, you just had to always have your head on a swivel in a match.
Oh, absolutely. Not only were you that third guy in the ring that could help the match along, and you had to keep an eye on the guys, the crowd, whatever may be happening, coming down the road, whether it's out of the locker room or someone come out of the crowd in the storyline of the match or whatever. You had to look out for your cameras. You had to try not to block the handheld camera. I gave up. There were so many photographers ringside in ECW. I just gave up worrying about them. You couldn't. There were places where you couldn't stand. I'm just like, I've got to do my job before you can do yours.
Absolutely, and I would agree. And you know what? A lot of guys, and you're right. And back in the early days of ECW, let me ask you this: did ECW? This is kind of just a personal question, but did ECW have a standard hard camera for all their shows?
Yeah, there was definitely a hard camera, and the regular TV or TNN. I think TNN only used one handheld, but I know for the hardcore TV or the original, show, whatever you want to call it, that was one handheld, and in the pay-per-view there were two handhelds and I think three stationary cameras.
Right.
So that was a little more difficult to work, but you got used to it.
Sure. Now, I guess, so back in the early days of ECW, before you really, hardcore TV started, Lord, I'm guessing, just completely guessing, what, mid-90s, early to mid-90s, around 94, 95 perhaps?
Even earlier, 93 really.
Okay.
Just when it was in Philadelphia. Our first TV taping was at a small college outside of Philadelphia called Cabrini College. And I think maybe the first night we did 3 or 4 weeks worth of TV. So it was a lot different in that day when Eddie Gilbert was the booker at the time. When we started TV, they brought Eddie in for his TV experience. And we did, I'm pretty sure we did 4 weeks of TV, like 14, 15 matches in one night.
Now, how did you originally get involved in the Eastern Championship Wrestling ECW product whenever it first began?
Well, it originally really grew out of another company called Tri-State Wrestling Alliance that ran local shows in the Philadelphia area. And then they would do four big shows a year at the Philadelphia Civic Center, which the Philadelphia Civic Center was where the NWA came. So that was where you saw Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard and all that. In fact, the first show I ever went to there for NWA was a Great American Bash. And the main event was Tully Blanchard and Ric Flair against Ron Garvin and Dusty Rhodes in a double bull rope match.
Nice.
Now they would run 4 times a year there, and then they folded, and Todd Gordon was kind of one of the financial guys behind it and wanted to keep it going with something new, and so he kind of brought everybody over from Tri-State to ECW, and they ran basically the same thing. Would run shows in the area until he was ready to do TV and got something together and got it picked up, and that was when he brought Eddie Gilbert in to run the TV.
Now, tell me what it was like for you. Now, the early product obviously was pretty raw. What was it like? You said you're there for really just at this point, it's really a standard, bigger, independent show that's now being put, towards a TV product. You have Eddie Gilbert running things. What was it like for you working for the early ECW?
It was a great experience because I had never done TV at all. The closest thing to TV was when Tri-State would videotape some of their stuff. Back in the day, it was videotape trading was big at the time. So that was how, you found out about guys in Japan and all that, and we would send stuff over to them and back and forth. So there was a little bit of it, but it wasn't really on a professional level where TV was different, and you had to learn right away. First week, you had to learn or you were probably gone. So it was a quick learning experience, and it evolved after Eddie left. Paul was involved before and helped Eddie with some of the booking and running things, and then when Eddie left, Paul took over. It was a real different experience just by the way they prepared, because Eddie would come in with a big long sheet hanging up on the wall and had everything all planned out for a month's worth of TV, where Paul would come in and sit down, and he must have known in his mind what he wanted to do, but not exactly how to get there. So, we're getting ready for the first match, and he's still sitting there writing the lineup sheet.
Oh, wow.
It was a real different experience to work things out that way. But they both work in their own way.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, Paul Heyman, it goes without saying, he really is. He's got his genius points to him, and he's in my opinion, call it what you will, he's the greatest creative mind in the wrestling business, in my opinion. Now, tell me this, real quick, let me address this in the chat room quick. Z-Bull spoke in the chat room, wants to ask you, jumping ahead a little bit, ECW, you had pretty much an outline by how you were running shows and how, how the bookings were going and things like that. What was the differences whenever TNN became involved? Whenever TNN puts the product on air and says, okay, we got you this spot, now we need you to do what for us?
I think they really, all they wanted was product on their network, because honestly, they didn't do anything for us. The only advertising TNN ever did for ECW was on ECW. You never saw us advertised on Monster Truck or Battle or what is it, bowling, whatever, Rock and Bowl, or the roller derby. You never saw our advertising anywhere except on our program. And there were a lot of weeks before we actually went on the air where we taped stuff and they said, no, we don't like it. And Paul, I think, Paul had this concept of staying true to what we were and not making a lot of changes, not making very obvious changes. And I think TNN wanted obvious changes. I guess more of a general wrestling fan-friendly environment as opposed to that little clique or genre that we had as fans.
Right. So it didn't really. Obviously you couldn't really go out there and probably do a lot of the insane stuff that was going on at the time. So did it change the in-ring product as much as? Did they want you to change the in-ring product a lot?
I think they probably did. I wasn't in for any of those kind of meetings where they said, you have to do this, you have to do that. But if they did, and I'm sure that they did, because that made Paul's attitude even more intense or more extreme where, you know, if they said we want you to go this far to the right, Paul went that far to the left, just to be a ball breaker for lack of a better term.
Sure. I think watching when ECW went to TNN, obviously everybody at this point thought that this was it for TNN. This was it for ECW. TNN was going to be the mecca, and everybody was going to make $1 million. How far in did you realize that obviously was not the case?
I really think once they turned down a lot of the TV products that we did for them. They didn't like the look of the arena. They didn't like the look of the building in Queens. But those things were our bread and butter. I mean, it was those buildings, that look, those fans that really got ECW to where we got to get to TNN, and we weren't going to turn our backs on them. It would have killed the company if killed it a lot faster, I should say. And, to turn our backs on those fans. Can you imagine what those fans would have been like at the arena or New York if we gave them, a pre-WWE attitude type product? They would have stilled it. We would have been lynched or run out of town.
Sure. I usually kind of go in timeline fashion because I'm real OCD about that, but I'm going to jump back and forth here and ask you about a few things as they come up. Obviously, with ECW, everybody sees ECW as being, those letters mean something to a lot of people. It means something to me, but those letters also meant something to Vince when Vince thought he could make money off the name itself, not necessarily the product. What was your opinion after the One Night Stand pay-per-view? They bring ECW back as a brand, and then, boom, if you saw it on TV, what were you thinking whenever you saw what Vince did with the new breed, I guess as they called it?
Well, I was there. I made it through the first 2 weeks of TV, and before the show started, you could just tell the difference. With that first TV taping, you could just see it and feel the difference that this isn't the ECW we're used to, or what we were even told was going to happen. We figured that it was going to, be a lesser extreme product. And it was a completely different product. It was a completely different company. But we were told certain things, and right off the bat, they changed right away. So, if you don't mind me asking, what type of things were they telling you when they said they're going to relaunch the brand? What type of things did they say would perhaps be true to the old product, or something that they perhaps misled you on in the beginning? Well, for me personally, it was the commitment to the originals. A lot of the guys had contracts. A lot of them didn't. Referees did not have contracts, were not offered contracts. And basically I was told, we're starting the company under the WWE banner, and we want you at every show. Great, no problem, I'm there. So we did the second pay-per-view, and the next night, Tuesday night, was TV taping in Trenton, New Jersey, which is a stone's throw for me. So, I knew I was going to drive.
Sure.
So go to the TV taping, and, okay, we'll see you next week in Albany. I'm like, okay, I'll drive to Albany. That's not bad. Drove to Albany, and all of a sudden, and just the attitude of it changed that, okay, well, now we want you at shows that you can get to. We're not paying for your flight or anything. So we want shows that you can come to shows that you can get to. Okay, wow. So I did the Albany thing, and then it changed where we'll call you or check with us, and we'll let you know if we need you. And contact person that I was given never got back to me. And I've never really been a person to beg for work. In the meantime, between the original ECW shutting down and restarting, I have a fairly successful business outside of wrestling. So I have that to fall back on. So I would just walk away from it. I say, I just don't need the aggravation. It's not fun. There were some other things, some changes with, the things that they wanted the wrestlers to do. Because I spoke to Jimmy Corderas the other day, a couple weeks ago, and he remembered this story too, is that I don't know whether it came from the Sci-Fi Network or if it came from creative or Vince or who to put the blame on this. But the original intro to ECW, if you remember, it was the intro on TV was the Zombie.
Right.
The ECW Zombie welcoming ECW to Sci-Fi Channel. Well, the original story was he was going to be an alien. And Sandman comes down and he canes the alien. And somebody, like I said, don't know if it was Vince or Sci-Fi Network or creative or who, said, "Oh no, you can't do that. You can't cane a living thing."
Oh wow!
Wow, what? And it was funny because I spoke to Jimmy Corderas a couple weeks ago, and I just wanted to verify that. I remember that. He goes, "Yes, that's true." So they changed the wrestler out who was in the costume and put the zombie in there. So, little things like that, right away. Like, it's not my mother's ECW.
Yeah, and I want to verify a few things. Number one, that gentleman's still traveling around as the ECW Zombie. That just goes to show you. Talking about 5 seconds of fame. He's just, that's him now, and he does appearances as it, and God knows. And number two, I don't know who in the world thought that the difference between somebody playing a living thing alien rather than the human being who is actually playing the zombie, which you're caning. I don't know how that exactly works out. That just goes to show you, man. And I think that comes down to the political correctness of society. You don't want to cane a living thing. I mean,
and the funny thing is, doesn't the Sci-Fi Channel show movies with alien invasions where they're attacking us and we're fighting back at them, so we're shooting at them?
Absolutely.
A little ridiculous point.
Yes. I mean, so here you are, you're obviously your work's being cut back. They're obviously scaling back. Who's really in charge of the ECW brand? Everybody wanted to believe when it came back that it was Paul Heyman's baby again and that he was going to drive it and they're going to run separate shows. First off, who was really making the calls at this point for ECW, the new breed?
I really think that Paul was supposed to at one time, and when it changed, I don't know. Paul would come out of the meeting room, the writer's room or whatever it's called, and tell people things. Stringer would tell people things too. So they were the kind of the guys that were the go-betweens between what they wanted and letting us know what they wanted. We had a meeting after the first TV taping that was run by John Laurinaitis. So, maybe it was him. We didn't have any contact. I personally didn't have any contact with anyone on the writing staff except for Bruce Pritchard involved in a promo. But that was it. So, I really do think that Paul was given the realm, be able to take control and run everything. But somewhere along the line that was taken away from him. And I don't know at what point it was, but it was definitely by the second week of TV.
Right. So I just want to verify. So at this point, the separate shows that they're running as ECW, quote unquote, how were the draws at these crowds? I mean, were they drawing well? Were they getting anything out of it? But
I never made it to those. We just did a couple of weeks of TV, and then I think the next week they were in like West Virginia or something, and I'm not going to drive there. And then after that they were doing a TV at the Wells Fargo Center, which is what they use in Philadelphia instead of the Spectrum now. And then there was a house show at the arena, and I never heard from anybody about those, and I never called anybody about them, so I couldn't tell you how they did. I know that they didn't get a positive fan reaction at the arena show, especially using guys who were quote-unquote WWE guys who are now part of WWE, or part of WWE.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. There's nothing more pleasing than to turn on an ECW quote-unquote show and watching the Big Show and Batista just get the most vulgar chants chanted at them and change the channel chant. It really warmed my cockles, I'll be honest.
But honestly, I'll have nothing bad to say about Big Show because in that meeting that I mentioned about with John Laurinaitis, there was a problem with the match laid out for television, and we were live that first week. The second week they taped. We went first and they taped, so they could edit it. But John Laurinaitis put a timing issue on the referee because it was a battle royal, and Big Show spoke up and said, no, they gave the signal, so it's not on them at all. So I have nothing bad to say about Show. You know, he's the guy who could have kept his mouth shut and let us take the blame because we're nobody.
Oh, absolutely. And let me verify that or clarify that comment. I don't know why I'd verify it since I already said it. Let me clarify that comment. I love the Big Show. I've met the guy. He's a phenomenal guy. So it's nothing against the actual workers themselves, but the fact that the WWE number one puts them in this position where they got to go out there in front of, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Manhattan Center, the old Manhattan Center, whatever, and it was a crowd that was not going to accept a main event that was two WWE main eventers. It just didn't work. So the fact that the crowd actually got to them, or at least let them know how they felt. That, I guess that's what I'm referring to. Those four guys were put in a terrible situation.
Yeah, they were. You can't blame the guy.
Yes. Let me ask you this, kind of going back to the original glory days of ECW. Tell me, Paul, and I was talking about this before, Paul liked to bring in guys. You just saw guys that would appear out of nowhere. You would turn on your TV, and all of a sudden, Scott Hall came in. I mean, you had guys that would just pop up out of nowhere. Tell me a story about that. Did you ever see somebody in the locker room and say, wow, that's interesting. What's he doing here?
Definitely Scott Hall was the guy who were like, wow, Scott Hall, this could be interesting. And it was just for 1 weekend. He just did 2 shows, and was a great guy to work with. Came in and was positive about everything. He even said, he looked at Big Sal. You remember Big Sal from the FBI, and he goes, I want to have a match with him and put him over. He should be over.
Nice.
And how can you think somebody like Scott Hall would come in and do something like that?
Sure.
So that was great. Jake Roberts showing up at the November to Remember from New Orleans. That was wild. Jake showing up at the Hardcore Heaven, the original one from down your way, actually down in Fort Lauderdale.
Yes, absolutely. Those are the moments you remember, and those are the moments to me that you had the blood and guts, but you had those holy shit moments, those moments that really made you think about, because everybody could sit there and say that Paul would bring in these guys to pop a rating or pop a, just to get people talking, but also, I mean, it really does make you think that anything can happen, and how cool is that to see, you see them incorporating Jerry Lawler into storylines. I mean, that's pretty special as a fan.
Sure, and there was, a couple of nights that we had Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton in.
Yes.
Trying to think who else was there. Brian Pillman showing up out of nowhere and basically, let him off his leash.
Yes.
And put on his act, and it was great.
Right. How much of obviously Steve Austin gets his rebirth there, really, and develops the Stone Cold character for all intents and purposes. How much were you around him? How much did you see what was going on with that? And did you feel something there? I mean, it sounds really cliche, but did you were around it when it was happening. How did you feel about Stone Cold or Steve Austin coming from WCW, now he's in ECW, doing what he's doing?
I loved it. I was a big fan of it. In fact, guys that I train now, he's one guy. They look at him before he was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Look at him as Stunning Steve Austin.
Yes.
See what he did in WCW. So for him to, and it wasn't a huge change either, but it was just, kind of a different feeling with him. Again, another guy came in and Paul let him off his leash. Do whatever you want. And they, if you remember the 2 big promos, he did the Hogan one, and he did the Bischoff one.
Yes.
So I mean, that was great, but in ring was great. He's like, yeah, man, with the match he had with with MainMan and Mike. He loved working with Mike. That was, he was excited about coming in and working with different people and working a kind of a different style than, the confinements of WCW.
Right, and honestly, and just my opinion, if he would have not got that chance to really be let off his leash, which so many guys did. So many guys came through there. You talk about Matt Bourne, who comes through there and is born again, the evil side of Doink. I mean, it really was amazing to see these guys just really be able to run with what they did great. And I think that's something in wrestling that a lot of guys take for granted, the fact that they take these characters that really don't fit who they are, the persona of who they really are, and they try to shove them down people's throats. And Paul really just took who guys were and said, hey, do that, and let's see what happens, because you look at Sandman, you look at what Stone Cold was, and all these guys exceeded expectations elsewhere because they were just being themselves.
Sure, not only that, but wrestlers who came from Japan or Mexico that really hadn't been seen a lot in the U.S. were able to come in. Paul just said, go out and put on a hell of a match. So that was when you had guys like Conan and Stereo and Uvi come in. Guys who would wrestle a lot in Japan, but really not a lot in the U.S. like Benoit and Jericho. So let them come in and put on a hell of a match, and that's important too. Absolutely.
I mean, obviously the work rate in ECW was. Everybody again. If you pick up ECW nowadays, the first thing you notice is the blood and gore and all that stuff, and the guts and the high dives, because immediately that's something that WWE has deprived fans of for so many years, is to see blood. So, but in my opinion, the one thing that I've always noticed whenever I study ECW tapes is the work rate. The guys that could go in there and put on a 20, 30-minute match and do it in front of a crowd that actually gave a damn.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough, and honestly, when anybody looks at being in ECW, for me, I just consider myself lucky that I was there. But I was also lucky enough to be able to do matches like Guerrero and Malenko and Mysterio and Psychosis, and some of those great work matches where I had the best seat in the house. I was in a ring with the guys. I'm like, holy crap, I'm working with these guys in the hell of a match.
Absolutely. Did you ever tell me a match where you were in there and you were thinking, wow, I'm nervous about working with these 2, 3, 4 guys in this particular match. Did that ever happen for you in ECW?
Sure. I think when Steve Austin came in, working with him, with Sandman and Mikey, that 3-way match, I think, and working with the Funks together, that was a little nerve-wracking. But any of the other guys who came in, I don't think I was really nervous about working for him as much as I was excited. I'm like, wait, I get to work with Guerrero and Malenko again tonight.
Right.
So I think it was more excitement than nerves. As big of a name as Cactus Jack was at the time, I had worked with him a long time ago in TWA. In fact, Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, he was the first big name that I worked with as a referee, where I'd worked with just a TWA known guy. The first match I did with any name recognition was him against David San Martino.
Right. Wow.
So I didn't have any nervous with working with him, even though who knows what half the time too.
Sure. And that it's fascinating that you say that, because in the early days, you really, some of the guys you worked with, and again, I go back to talking about why I think you're a great referee, because you really did have to adapt to all types of different situations, but an average referee doesn't work with the type of talent you worked with. And even in the because a WWE referee, and this is not discounting any of them, has they're working with great guys, some of the best talent in the world, but you legitimately didn't really know who you'd be working with from, perhaps month to month, week to week, because Paul was A, always bringing guys in, and B, you had a little bit of a talent raid, and Paul was constantly bringing guys in from Mexico, and you had a lot of different styles you had to adapt to in the ring and to call the match.
Oh, absolutely. But then there were also certain guys that you worked with on a regular basis. You developed kind of a relationship with them. I worked with Justin Credible all the time. I worked with Lance Storm and Jerry Lynn all the time.
Sure.
Simon Diamond I worked with a lot. In fact, the idea was to try not to make each other laugh during the match. We had, worked together so much. In fact, when I would check his boots, we were quoting lines from the movie Caddyshack to each other. So it was just, goofy stuff like that that I think made it more visual to the fan that, we knew what we were doing as referees, because we definitely were comfortable in there. There were times we weren't comfortable, a couple with the fireballs and the flaming tables and the barbed wire sometimes, but otherwise, it was fairly comfortable.
It's been a while, but I vaguely remember you taking a Mike Awesome powerbomb at ECW One Night Stand, if I'm not mistaken. So I wanted to discuss that real quick. Yeah, how did that come about? Was that something that Mike looks at you the next and says, hey, look, Jim, I don't know if you're ready for this or not, but I'm powerbombing your ass tonight. You're just going to take it. Did that, because he told me about it before. Yeah,
you just, say, okay, I'm going to do it. He told me about it before the match. And he said, he really told me, don't tell anybody about this. After the match, I'm going to powerbomb you. I'm like, okay. So they had their match. During the match, he got hurt. He hurt his leg, and he was having trouble on his leg. So if you remember the match, the finish was outside of the ring.
Right.
And so we're outside the ring, and I asked him, are you going to still powerbomb me? Are you okay to do it? And he said, yes. Well, let me backtrack a little bit, too. Before the match, when he told me that, I said, Mike, I'm not the most athletic guy. I'm probably not going to be able to get up for you. I'm pretty fat. At the time, I was really fat and out of shape.
Right.
And he said, don't worry, I'll pick you up. I said, okay. So the match ends. I asked him if he's okay to do it. He goes, yeah, let's get in there and do it. So we get in there, and he power bombed me, and he couldn't get me up that well. And I was like, I'm going to break my neck. But luckily, I was able to get around enough and tuck my head and got, was safe with it. But if you go back and watch the DVD, they really didn't catch it, and they had to show it in replay because nobody knew about it.
Well, I mean, hey, look at it this way. How many referees get a replay from being powerbombed by Mike Austin in the middle of the ring? It's right there. Exactly. I give you an applause. How far ahead of time did you know that the ECW brand, so to speak, was coming back before the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view?
The second pay-per-view, we had no idea about it. And then the rumbling started, and I got the call, we're going to do another pay-per-view, and we're going to start the company. So I would say maybe it was a month or so before the second One Night Stand that we knew that was going to happen.
Okay. And, you also called, I believe it was Mysterio's match with Eddie Guerrero. I believe that was the match you were. That was the two matches you were. Was it?
It was Mysterio and Psychosis.
Mysterio Psychosis. Wait, on the One Night Stand pay-per-view?
Yeah, the first One Night Stand, it was Mysterio, and I'm pretty sure it was Mysterio and Psychosis, because I did that. I did the Mike Awesome Tanaka match. And the second one, I only did the Tanaka Balls Mahoney match.
Okay. Obviously, that way, I remember, I'm trying to think, because Mysterio worked Sabu one time, I think. I'm trying to think. I'm not prepared like I should be, so I apologize, sir. I got Rey Mysterio Psychosis. Yes, it was Psychosis. My mistake. Okay, so Rey Mysterio Psychosis, I don't remember a lot about that matchup, but obviously Rey Mysterio changed his style. I would say, I don't know, in my opinion, he changed his style for the WWE. What was it like working with those two guys again?
That was great. Real comfortable. Ray welcomed me right in. Hey, Jim, good to see you again. And I just said, whatever you guys want, I'll follow along. And said,
Sure.
okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is all you need to know. I'm like, great. There was one thing that they did that they tumbled out into the ring, and I guess on camera it kind of looked a little dangerous. And I went out and checked on them, got back in, gave the signal that they were okay. And after the match, Ricky Steamboat was the agent for that, and he said, hey, thanks for going out and checking on them, making sure they were okay. And the first thing that came to my mind, other than, no problem, thank you very much, was, why wouldn't I? That's something I was trained to do as a referee. That's part of the referee's job. Why wouldn't you?
You make a great point because, exactly. That is a part of the referee's job is to make sure both guys aren't legitimately injured. It's not like you're just going to stand there and angrily scream, get up. You do have to check on the guys. So that is odd. Let me ask you this. On all the who was the best? Who do you think in ECW out of all the guys that worked in ECW and the guys you were around, obviously, who was the best promo guy that you were around in ECW?
Wow. Probably Shane Douglas. Next to Paul himself, who could do a great promo because he knew the emotion that he wanted. Shane Douglas was probably the best.
So we're talking live promos, obviously, in front of a live audience. Shane Douglas, and I would have to agree with that. Shane elicited, he got that effect from the audience. But then again, we have to bring up, and I'm sure you were right there for it, the Dudleys. Bubba Ray, for God's sakes. I mean, I don't know. I've always bounced back and forth between, Bubba, telling a girl in the front row that her, mother may have, swallowed a certain ethnicities, but there is a certain something to be said for the reactions that the Dudley boys got in ECW. It had to be terrifying to just even be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was probably, we talk about when did you feel, the most in harm's way in ECW was when standing in the ring while the Dudleys were cutting a promo. Right. In Chicago, I was actually hit with a chair. Somebody folded up the chair and tossed it in the ring, and it actually hit me instead of them.
Wow. That could never be good. You never want to be, if you hear Bubba Ray Dudley pick up, or, Bully Ray, whatever that you want to call him now, you hear him pick up a mic in ECW, you don't want to be anywhere near him. I can tell you, I've watched the promos, and even back on the Sunshine Network, you knew what he was going at. The editing job was, it's like the editing job kind of covered up what he was saying, but you really knew he was just balls to the wall with every promo.
Right. Oh, he absolutely was.
Yeah. So I've always looked at ECW's promo skills, guys in the ECW locker room. You had a lot of guys that were great at promos, and I don't think that's another part of ECW, that doesn't get a lot of the credit because they really originated a lot of the promos they did, a lot of the TV work. I mean, the Pulp Fiction segments where they would, end the show with that's classic. I mean, how great was that? Because you got everybody on camera and you got everything you wanted to get over, and it was entertaining.
Right, and that's why those promos took us until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning at a building to get done. We actually were in a couple buildings where they turned the lights off on it. So yeah, I mean that it wasn't a fact that they were getting done wrong. It was that, all right, let's try this, and and everybody just kind of sat around and waited their turn.
Sure. So let's just jump right to the question that I'm being asked here on Twitter. Craziest moment you've ever experienced in person in ECW?
Great. I don't think I've ever been asked crazy.
Crazy.
Maybe the night that the chairs were thrown in the ring. You remember when the show came on the air, the chairs were being thrown in the ring. Cactus and Terry Funk were in the ring. I had that match, and if you look real careful, you can't see me because I hid under the ring. The chairs started flying, and I had no way to get to the locker room from the rain of chairs. So I slid under the ring and stayed under there until I knew it was good. In fact, they even came and got me and said, "Okay, you can get out of there now."
Wow.
That was probably scary.
I can't. I've had fans pick up a guardrail and throw it, but I've never actually, when you're standing in the ring or even outside the ring and you see, 1,000 fans all looking for a chair to throw it. That's just, and it all started with I think it was Terry asking for one chair and give me a chair, and that there.
Right, and then all of a sudden there's 3, and then there's 6, and then there's 60.
Wow, that and it really is a classic moment. You're right. Did you ever call any of the actual barbed wire matches that were the barbed wire rope matches?
Oh yeah, I did all of the barbed wire matches except for the Carey Funk Sabu match. Otherwise, I did all the other barbed wire matches, and I think it was just out of the mere fact that nobody else wanted to play with barbed wire, and I was like, oh, good, I don't care.
Yeah, I've messed around in barbed wire before. I ain't gonna lie to you, and it's not much fun. I wanted to ask you your opinion on calling those matches because I can't imagine. You say nobody else wanted to get involved. I wonder why. I mean, it was razor sharp, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, you're in there.
Yeah, and if you remember, a lot of the ECW matches were without ropes and just the barbed wire.
Yes. Yes.
So it was a little more even difficult to work with. I did the public enemy against the Funk Brothers barbed wire match,
which was a great match, and I don't think a lot of people noticed that matchup because it wasn't because once you saw Funk and Sabu, that match there, you're cutting guys apart. So you're looking at them and you're like, sir, you got barbed wire in your eye, okay? That's not necessary. Like it really set it to another level, but matches like that there, first off, obviously barbed wire and hardcore matches were always popular in Japan. You had Funk and Cactus in Japan doing all these matches. What did you have to, and perhaps you can answer this, what did ECW have to go through in some of these cities to actually pull off a barbed wire match? Did the Athletic Commission ever get involved and say, whoa, guys, no, we're not doing this?
They probably did, and I would guess that maybe a few drinks were bought while the Athletic Commission was looking the opposite way, or whatever. I don't really know, but I know Pennsylvania has an Athletic Commission, and they weren't really ever concerned about blood or the hardcore end of it as much as keeping it within the barricade, never go into the crowd for anything, which was their main concern. Right. I know we did some barbed wire matches down in Florida. I know I worked in Fort Lauderdale. It was Raven against MainMan barbed wire match. And I can't remember if there was an Athletic Commission down there, but you also have to remember that if you look at it, we really didn't do a lot of barbed wire matches. Right. I think maybe we probably did a dozen over the years. But we did work with barbed wire as a tool other than around the ring. You had the reel of barbed wire hanging above the ring and Stairway to Hell matches and things like that. Somehow we got around it. I don't know. That's a question for Paul, I think.
Sure, and I'm sure I'll call Paul up right now and get him on the show next week. He's quite the hard man to get a hold of.
He'll take your call right after mine.
Exactly. And backing up, I can tell you from working the independents in Florida, there really is no Athletic Commission. Hell, I'm surprised. Some of the stuff I see on the independents down here nowadays just shocks me. And I'll ask you this because you've been around the business for a long time, and obviously going back, I'm not sure I wanted to ask you this if you still were. You were involved with Larry Sharp's Monster Factory, if I'm not mistaken, at one point, correct?
I was, not anymore.
Okay.
We have our own. We kind of split. It's kind of split in a couple of different directions.
Right.
From when I was originally involved.
Right. So, but you've been involved with helping guys, training people, and things like that. What would you say probably the worst mistake that actual referee makes in a match. What should they work on if they're in the ring?
Not being seen, I think, is the most important thing. To talk to you about it's a little different because you've done a little bit of research and whatnot. But if I were to ask somebody who's a wrestling fan, just in general, and knows who I am, name one of my matches that I worked, and they probably couldn't, which means I did my job. But the match is about the wrestler, not about the referee, unless there's a reason for it. But I think the most important thing is to hide and not be known. I mean, I've worked some great matches, and people will say, "Oh, you did that match? Wow, like, good. I did my job. You didn't, it wasn't about me. It's about the guys. It's about their story." Right.
So I want to introduce you to somebody. I don't have him here, but I want to talk about somebody. There's a referee down here who promotes shows. He goes by the name of Mr. B. He calls himself the People's Referee. I wonder where he got that from. People's Champ, People's Referee. I don't know. But have you ever seen a referee actually do autograph sessions at intermission? Like where they go out and they actually sell merch. They sell T-shirts and they have hats. And does that happen?
Actually, I've done that, where I've just sold pictures.
But pictures is one thing. This guy actually sells T-shirts that say Mr. B, the People's Referee, and he's also the promoter, mind you, okay? I just want to point that out. And this is just one of those things that bothers me about certain guys who feel like if you sell a picture, mind you, you also work for, in my opinion, perhaps at one point the second biggest, most popular wrestling organization in the country. We're talking about independents and guys who, don't necessarily have the name to go on. Would you, guys that say that, I guess you say that not to be seen, he takes all the attention and puts it on him in a match. How does that hurt the product?
Oh, it helps. It hurts tremendously. Like I said, it's about the wrestler. It's not about the referee's story. I never introduced the bump into a match and said, "Hey, bump me." It's only been like, we need to bump the ref. Okay, well, how much of a bump do you want? Okay, well, let me do this. Or if you need a more intense one, then okay, I can take this. And that's as much as I ever put into a match. One time, this is the first time it ever happened to me. Kevin Sullivan was going over a match, and the guys were going over it, and there was something that made the ref look bad, in his opinion. And he goes, no, it makes the ref look bad, and it kills the match.
Nice.
So, and I was like, wow, first time I ever heard anybody care about, how bad a ref looks. So, there are times a ref needs to stand out, but they're also, the majority of the time, he needs to hide, let the boys do their thing. Sure,
and I agree with that 110%. A good friend of mine, he was a former wrestler back in the 80s and 90s, the wrestling Dr. Howley. We were discussing this the other day about how referees need to be, in my opinion, respected because really they're the only line drawn in the sand. They're the authority figure, and they're there to keep wrestlers in check. And when you, like I saw a guy the other day, pull a referee out of the, in the middle of somebody or whatever, and he actually put his hands over the referee's eyes. And at that point, the crowd's looking at you thinking, there's nothing believable about that. There's nothing good that's going to come out of this. What do you think, I guess, as a referee in general, do you see what I'm saying? Do you think referees need to be, warranted as the law in the ring rather than made necessarily to look like fools like a lot of them are now in matches?
Right, yeah, I agree with that. The referee is as much of a tool to be used in the ring as a belt or, any other inanimate object. You have to use the referee in the right way. And the difference between a table and a chair or something like that compared to a referee will help you. If a cable cannot cooperate, and that will help you. You know, talk to the referee. Make sure you're telling the right story. You know, a referee does need to show authority, which means you need to have the right refereeing in place. A lot of these indies, and I haven't done indies in years,
right?
But at the time, it was, you know, we're not going to use you because I can pay my brother-in-law or my cousin, you know, $20 instead of charging you to come in and rep. So, you know, there's a big difference.
And I say yes because you're bringing up things that we've discussed, and the fact that you have guys that will say, well, I want to referee. I want to be a part of the show. I want to referee, and they'll pay their brother-in-law or somebody like that to go in there, but yet they're not trained. And a referee is sometimes the most important part of a match. If you have two guys that haven't necessarily been working a long time, that referee is going to become a huge part of the match, bigger than normal. So, I mean, in my opinion, referees have to be, you want a referee that is, one, fully trained, and two, that knows exactly how to, you know, perhaps lead a match and sometimes even help call a match. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had guys in the ring that you're like, okay, they're not as experienced as, you know, some of the other guys, and you've actually had to help them out more so?
Sure, I've done that a couple of times. Told guys to take it home. Even in ECW, there would be a fight to break out in the crowd, and I'd be like, go to a hold. So the wrestlers go to a hold and let the crowd, you know, fight it out or calm down or whatever their distraction is, because they're not paying attention to the match.
Right.
Then when you realize that they're back to the match, then you say, okay, keep going.
Right.
You know, so that experience means a lot. And, you know, the training, not just throwing somebody in there. You know, so you really do need somebody with experience and, you know, not just a lot of years, but knows what they're doing. A lot of matches. And one other thing the referee does is he kind of cheerleads, brings the crowd along. He can show emotion. You know, like, wow, that was a great move, or whoa, look out, you know, whatever he wants to do in the way of showing emotion. And that the crowd will follow along with it a little bit on that too.
Absolutely.
So you can book me for refereeing at anything. No, I'm kidding.
No, and God knows, you'd be the first referee I'd call if you were down here in Florida, because, you know, some of the shows around here that I work for, you know, and we have a lot of great referees, but then again, you have certain shows you show up at, and you have guys, you're looking at them, you're like, I haven't seen you referee before, and I've been on a few independent shows, and they're like, oh, well, this is my first show, and I'm like, oh, well, who taught you? Who trained you? Oh, well, no, I'm you know, Billy Bob's fiance's wife, and you're like, oh, no.
Here's the first clue that the guy is not a referee or not a trained referee. What do you think it is when you see the guy?
Well, I would assume it's probably what they're dressed in.
His shirt doesn't fit.
Yes. Yes, it's trust me, I've seen guys that have went out there in just and obviously I think the appearance makes the referee as well. I've seen guys that went out there in shorts before, and guys that just don't really present the fact, you know, and that doesn't work for me. I'm not a big fan of that.
Now, granted, if I were to go down to my basement and find my referee shirt, it probably wouldn't fit me either, because I've got a couple of pounds on me from the last time I rep. But, I mean, I'm like little guys who do shirts, you know, he should be wearing a small, it's double extra large, you know, he's wearing pants, you know.
Yeah.
It
how many shows, you know, I've been on where literally one referee will come out of the ring and take his shirt off and give it to the other guy, and he puts on, it's like, this is never a good sign when that's happening. You just know you're in trouble.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that too. And, you know, like I said, I think the last show I worked, an independent show, was up in Massachusetts, and I would say it was probably 6 years ago.
Right.
It's not longer, because I think the last match I actually worked was Maven against Tess, and on an indie show up there. So, you know, how long ago could that have been?
That was a while ago, yeah. So, I mean, obviously you have a lot of successful ventures outside side right now, and obviously, I like I mentioned before, and I want to take a brief minute again. You have oldtimewrestling.net. You have shows coming up on May 11th at 2 p.m., Fan Appreciation Day, May 18th, 2 and 7 p.m. And from everything I've seen and heard, there's a lot of successful things going on at oldtimewrestling.net. Go visit it, folks. I'm telling you. Why do you not really work the independents anymore? What exactly is it that keeps you from doing that? Is it just a choice, or?
Well, I think that, what we talked about earlier about it's cheaper to throw my brother-in-law $10 or a six-pack of beer or a case of beer, whatever it is, as opposed to, and not that I'm looking for a ton of money,
right.
but as opposed to paying me what I think I deserve.
Right.
Also, I don't like, because I'm so involved with OTW, running it and being a part of it, I don't like doing shows that are right on top of me, because then I'm helping my competition.
I can understand that.
So, I like to stay away from other promotions right in the area, and then anyone else, with the price of gas, I got to charge, it's not worth it for me to drive if I'm going to get X amount of money, but it costs me 2X to get there.
Sure.
And I'm at the point also where I think I've pretty much done everything I really wanted to.
Sure.
With ECW, and I probably owe my wife 20 years of sitting home on Saturday nights watching Lifetime movies with her.
Man, I tell you what, Jim, if it comes to that and you're sitting at home watching a Lifetime movie and you're just looking down thinking, man, I used to referee Benoit and Guerrero. Just think about it. Just think it over before it comes to that, sir.
But not that I would turn down the right offer to work for somebody. Right. I'd love to come to Florida more often.
I'd love to have you. There's not enough good referees anymore, and I mean that because, again, the fans don't realize what an integral part of a referee is of a show and a match, and it just, to me, referees can change the pace of a match too. They can absolutely read the crowd. When you got guys in there who aren't necessarily paying attention to the reaction of the crowd, they can actually, take a look at the crowd, and if a good referee who knows the business can actually, help pick up the pace of the match and things like that. And I don't think good referees get paid enough for what they do.
No, exactly. And that, like I said, that's part of the reason that I sit home on Fridays and Saturdays as much as I do.
Sure. I want to revisit something that I was told. I had a good friend of mine, John Carl. He was obviously he was a writer for the WWE at one point, and he told me a story on the show about the ECW. I don't believe you were with the company at this point, but it was the first ECW actual pay-per-view. I don't know if you remember this or not, but what was it?
Fairly legal. I was there.
No. I'm sorry. Let me reframe that.
Okay.
ECW's WWE pay-per-view.
Big difference. To remember.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. Okay.
Yeah. Do you remember any of this? Do you remember hearing how atrocious this damn thing was? Okay. Good.
I remember hearing about how bad it was, but I never saw it. I don't think I've gotten a pay-per-view since for the second one-night stand. I think, in fact, I probably didn't even get that. Probably the last pay-per-view I paid for. Oh, I know. Remember when TNA used to do the weekly ones?
Yes.
Okay, well, they did one that was like the week of Christmas. The one year that was like 10 cents. It was like a highlight show. I got that one.
Well, at least you went all out and contributed to the product. I mean, 10 cents. I mean, I do give you credit for taking that risk on the product, because trust me, nowadays. But you brought up an excellent point, and thank God you did, because my brain doesn't work all the time. I mean, barely legal. Tell me. I mean, you hear so many people talk about it, and obviously the product itself was just at a high at that point. What was it like working that first pay-per-view?
It was an amazing feeling. We were told to be there at 12:30 in the afternoon just because they wanted to make sure everybody was in town. And for those who don't remember, this was in Philadelphia. I only live 10 minutes away from the arena outside of Philadelphia. So for me to get there at 12:30 was not a problem. So I get there, and they're like, okay, everybody's here. You know, we need everybody back by a certain time so we can do some promos and just make sure everybody's in house and dressed and ready to go. Test this, test that, everything. So I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't go anywhere. I sat there. It wasn't an empty building, but I just sat there and kind of took it all in, thinking, wow, I didn't think I'd ever get to do something like this or ever get to this level. I never saw myself going to WCW or WWE. I thought, wow, this is it. This is my high point. And I just really kind of soaked it in and took every second of it in I could.
The events leading up to Barely Legal, obviously, it bounced back and forth whether you guys were actually going to have that first pay-per-view or not. Did you ever actually think it was going to happen? I mean, it had to be a hell of an achievement for you to be a part of something after having so many setbacks.
Yeah, and there were a couple of weeks before that it looked like it wasn't going to happen. Arguments, there were breakdowns and arguments in the locker room between guys, and just, you know, the frustration was building up, and, you know, the intensity level was getting there, and I remember being in Pittsburgh when it kind of all exploded, and maybe 2 weeks before the pay-per-view happened, and Paul just sat everybody down and was like, what are you guys thinking? You know, we're about ready to break through that next wall, and you're falling apart. Keep it together. This is what we've all worked for, not you by yourself or not you by yourself. We work together as this team. And he always kept that team idea in a lot of the guys. And a lot of guys, I've been there, I've done that. But a lot of us who had never been there before, the younger guys, the guys who had worked hard and wanted independence and were at the beach for years and years and years, were like, yeah, we're a family. We got to stick together. We got to make this thing happen. This might be our only break. You know, this might be our break. Somebody sees me go up to the next level, or some of us think this is my next break, and this might be my only break.
Right. Again, jumping around here because when I think of something, I have to bring it up because, you know, if I don't, I won't. Literally. During the time, obviously, who would you say the best in-ring performer was, first off, that you actually worked with in ECW as a whole? Best in-ring guy, bar none.
Wow. You really can't peg it down to one guy. I think the two guys that I would mention first would be Shane Douglas and Bam Bam Bigelow. So they were such ring generals, not only in the ring but in the locker room too. And you know, obviously they could wrestle their asses off. Shane was great with the promos on top and get the psychology of the match down. And Bigelow was just an amazing performer. Yeah. I think he was way overlooked this year for the WWE Hall of Fame since it was in New Jersey. He's from New Jersey. I mean, he's probably the biggest, lightest, high-flying, 310-pound guy, you know, that there was. And and outside of the ring, he had the biggest part. He was such a sweet guy to the kids and people. And, you know, he's one guy really missed out of all the guys he lost. Bigelow's one guy really, really missed. And again, I'm more asking rather than proclaiming, but the Bigelow Taz match where the ring collapsed in the corner there, were you working that match, or who was actually the referee? John Finnegan had that match. Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, I sound like a complete bark when I say this, but that wasn't, obviously, the ring wasn't gimmicked at that point, was it?
There was a trap door.
Okay. See, I've always wondered that.
If you can remember the building, it was Asbury Park, which was a stage and an arena. So it had a ramp that went from the stage to the ring, like the old WCW type of thing. And Mikey Whipwreck actually crawled under the ramp all the way through, and knew that when Bigelow and Paz went onto the runway, that was the time to release the trapdoor and get out of there before they fell off.
Right.
And they knew that when they go back, not to work in that corner of the ring until it was time to go through.
Right. So that was a great spot. And, you know, what's great about it is that normally when you play in spots like that, you wouldn't have a match. You wouldn't have matches afterwards. And
right.
Here, you know, that's what made it so amazing, you know?
Well, because they knew that other than that, the other pop was the building with the head.
All right.
You know, if you remember, Al Snow was popular at the time with head, and we handed out styrofoam heads.
Yes.
We had a guy who would go into the fashion district of New York City with a U-Haul truck and load it up with foam heads and buy everyone he could get. And we'd hand them out to the crowd just before the match and come back and music hits, and there are those heads swinging back and forth. And we knew that was a huge pop. It was great. It was a great visual pop, you know, looking at it on TV.
And I'll be honest with you. I mean, back whenever I had gotten into ECW in '97, around there, that Al Snow with his head gimmick was, to me, the most amazing thing at that point, because one, it was basically like I was 16 and doing acid, because, you know, the camera work and things like that. It really was. I was either having a stroke or doing acid at the time. But
there was a flashback for me.
Yeah. So, and you know what? I mean, watching it, Paul had this thing, man. He could take guys that would go to the WWE or WCW and just kind of be mid-card guys because they were saddled with some shit gimmick or they were just not, you know, to be themselves. And he brings them in, and the next thing you know, they're main eventing. I mean, look at Candido, who was one of the top 10 workers on my list, and obviously Al Snow. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he was able to pull out the best of people, whether it was, you know, talking to them and saying, hey, you're pissed at Bischoff for letting you go, or you're pissed at Vince for letting you go. Well, take it out on them here by putting on a great match, showing them what you can really do, other than that being a stupid lumberjack or a stupid garbage collector or a plumber or whatever you were.
Gosh, and another guy I want to talk to you real quick. I got so much I'm just spouting out here because now I'm kind of thinking. Salvatore Bellomo, whenever he was in ECW, obviously, I mean, we could talk about Sal all day, but you saw Sal back in WWF, and you're like, and then he comes to ECW, and good Lord, tell me about working around him.
That was a great guy to work with. He was a completely different person outside of the ring. He would bring his family, his kids, and everything, and but he was there in WWE in the day, or WWF really, in the day that a lot of us grew up in watching. So it was great to have him in and kind of hear little different stories and things like that. But when he got in the ring, it was this knucklehead gladiator throwing out teddy bears. Yeah, he really was kind of the original, a mixture between Bruiser Brody and perhaps Eugene. He really was just a I was going to say Doink, but yeah, Bruiser Brody and Doink. Even better. Yes, absolutely. And it was amazing watching guys. I've never popped as hard as I did watching Matt Bourne, which to this day, Matt Bourne still, he worked a show down here in Orlando recently, kind of doing the Jokerish type Doink gimmick, and it started in ECW. I mean, there was the evil Doink in WWE, but when he went to ECW, I don't know why it's WCW, ECW, he actually became more of himself. Right. Yeah, it was that, I think a lot of it was, we'll just use Matt as the example, but you can put any wrestler in the, use any wrestler's name. But it's back to the tape trading time. You remember seeing tapes of Matt Bourne in Portland And you didn't get that Matt Bourne when Vince brought him in and handed him a clown costume. So I think a lot of fans wanted to see that Matt Bourne who could do that type of work that styling. So I think Paul gave a lot of guys that opportunity to do that.
Right.
That was one of them. Tracy Smothers was another one who got the opportunity to prove what he could really do.
See, and you're exactly right. You see, now if Paul would have brought Matt Bourne in and made him like Big Josh but an axe murderer, then, like he just goes, he just takes an axe and, like the match doesn't even begin, he just bludgeons his opponent, ring the bell. I'm just saying, I'm just, fantasy booking, but, we have a chat room question coming in here real quick. How was reffing New Jack's matches?
Not as difficult as you would think.
Sure.
The smart thing to do was kind of stand behind him. That way you really wouldn't get hit with anything.
Sure.
There was no problem with working New Jack's matches. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew where he was. There were a couple times when he got knocked out or close to knocked out. It's all a positioning thing, no matter what type of match it is. ECW for referee, I think, was more positioning than anybody else, than any other company. Because you had to stay out of the way of inanimate objects. You had to stay out of the way of Mysterio flipping Psychosis. You had to stay out of the way of Malenko and Guerrero rolling around and being able to get to what they wanted to do. And, so that's another important thing for referees, stay out of the way.
Absolutely. And that's a huge, huge point you just made. Any of my guys who are listening to this show, make sure you pay attention to that. If you're, I'm
giving away all my secrets for free here.
Yeah, you really are, and thank God you're doing it for me. I'm going to make sure I cut up all this and be like, hey, I'm gonna put it on the internet and be like, Jim Molineaux gives away every secret in the business ever as a referee. I will.
That's why you should bring me in. That's why you need to bring me down to Jackson.
Absolutely, sir. I've got 3 promoters right now. I'm going to call and be like, look, I got Jim Molineaux, the ECW original. Again, in my opinion, one of the best referees I watched because you were always in the right place at the right time, and you sold. Another thing, you mentioned this, and again, the referees I know, if you're listening to this, sell moves with facial expressions. Sell it. Look at somebody in the crowd and sell it like you're actually wrestling the match. I mean, it makes a big difference in the match.
Sure.
And you did that.
Like I said, the referee is kind of like a not really a cheerleader, but kind of a leader for the fans. If
sure.
the referee sells something, then doesn't think that anybody can do that. And I think that's the problem with independent wrestling today is that everybody thinks that they can be a wrestler, they can be a referee, or they can be this or that. You can't. A lot of people don't realize that the best way they can help wrestling is to buy a ticket to the show.
Absolutely. Amen. And I was on the outside for a match managing a few weeks ago, and this is I just wanted your opinion on this. If this would have happened in ECW, how this would have went over. Spot comes up where, the guy's outside of the ring and he's, trying to get back in the ring, and I was going to attack him on the outside, or at least tease I was, maybe not attack him. But the security guard, who was there paid to protect us from the crowd and vice versa, actually stepped in front of me at that point and stopped me from attacking another wrestler. Which,
here's
again,
what would have happened. Here's what would have happened in ECW. I'm you. I'm the manager. I would have punched him in the head. The wrestler who's still in the ring would have come out and punched him in the head. The wrestler who's selling on the floor would have punched him in the head. The referee would have come out of the ring and punched him in the head. Then the locker room would have emptied, and what was left of the guy would have been left to the crowd.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because I thought it was a little rough at first, because I was like, at first I was thinking if this was an actual spot, I would have absolutely knocked him down or something to get through him. But There was a spot. It was kind of a tease to the crowd, trying to get them, fired up a little bit. And, if he would have jumped at me, maybe, just maybe, there would have been a little interaction. But I didn't want to take any heat off the match or anything. And to me, though, the point of this whole thing is the fact that guys who want to be involved in the wrestling business, who don't necessarily want to be involved in the wrestling business to the full extent. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There are guys that want to play wrestling.
There are students that I have at OTW, because we train guys too. Mm-hmm. I have students that do nothing more than take popcorn.
Sure.
Because, they need to learn. They need to, get some discipline in them. So they make popcorn. They clean up the popcorn. They sell pictures. They take out the trash.
Nice.
But all that stuff being said, it's nothing that I wouldn't do myself running the show. I've made popcorn. I've sold hot dogs. I've taken the trash out because nobody knows it's overflowing. So
right.
Any of the guys that I train, I don't ask them to do anything I wouldn't do myself to make the show better.
Let me ask you this. Do you think, obviously, being involved in the business still, do you think paying dues, I don't think there's enough paying dues in the wrestling business anymore. What's your take on guys getting in the wrestling business and paying their dues?
Well, I think that the problem with it is not about not paying dues, is that those who feel they've paid their dues are guys who wrestle on trampolines in backyards and think that when they go to their first indie promotion, they know what they're doing. No, right. You don't know what you're doing. You weren't trained by somebody who has 20 years, 10 years, or has made it to a certain level where you should be able to listen to them. It's not, the guy who set up the trampoline in the backyard isn't the guy who trained you. So I think that's where that lack of, I'll say it's a lack of respect more than anything. That's where that comes from. And in a way, ECW is a little blamed for that, because we had a lot of smaller guys that came in, but those guys had put in 5 years, 10 years on the independent circuit, or in Mexico or in Japan or whatever. So it's not like they were untrained and didn't know what they were doing. They paid their dues. So, and it's nothing against smaller guys. It's just the average guy who thinks he can do it because somebody who kind of looks like him is doing it. There's a big difference.
And I completely agree, and I think promoters kind of help guys who don't respect the business get into the business. It becomes kind of a double-edged sword. Two people are kind of working against what I believe in, and I'm an old-school guy. I study this business, but I study a lot of the older stuff, and I see how, in my opinion, it should be done, and I don't think just anybody should be led in the business simply because you either pay somebody or you, quote, want to do it. So
right. It's that way here with me with OTW. We're half an hour out of Philadelphia. So sure. We have tons of wrestlers all over the place here. And there are a lot of guys that I won't use because I just feel that they won't respect what we're trying to do, because it's about them, not about the company. And that's something wrestlers have to know too. That, a promoter is bringing you in to help his company, not to help you. You're there to help him. He's not there to help you.
Absolutely. And that goes to another thing. I do have to start wrapping up because we're running out of time, but another thing I wanted to point out is that independent wrestling nowadays, and I'm sure you'll see it this way, if you bring in somebody, let's say you bring in a name that's been in WWE or whatever, I would bring in those guys to help my product and help what I'm doing, rather than bring those guys in and put them in a spot where they look better than the guys that I've helped,
exactly.
groom and,
Exactly. That's one of the reasons with OTW we don't do that. Plus, the other reason is how much, whatever that guy charges, whether,
sure.
His fee, his airfare, his hotel, or whatever you have to pay for, will he bring that back into my house for me to make my promoter? So that's something else you have to look out for.
Absolutely. Last question here. It's actually coming in right now through the Facebook page. what was it like when Vince first worked with Paul Heyman in WWE, then the invasion angle, I guess they were doing type on Raw and that type of thing back in 96, 97 era?
Now, I really don't know because I wasn't involved with any of that. When they did the invasion shows at Raw at Manhattan Center, I didn't know anything about it until that night, or when I got done work. Somebody called me and said, "Hey, make sure you watch WWE tonight." I'm like,
wow.
Okay. And I was like, why didn't anybody let me know? You know, I could have gotten out of work, but they only took one referee up, and they took John Finnegan, which is great. John's a great guy. John actually trained me. So we worked together for the whole time. Actually, we were the only two guys that were there the whole time and never left.
Did you ever get a call from, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't have, but did you ever get a call from the WWE or WCW saying, hey, we could use a seasoned, referee who can come in and work for us?
No, because they had plenty of seasoned referees at the time, too.
That blows my mind, though, man. I seen you do little things in the ring as a referee that most workers don't realize, that means something. And I wasn't just kissing your ass whenever I brought you on. I legitimately think you're one of the best referees to do it. And it goes with, like I said, you look at guys like John Finnegan, obviously Brian Hildebrand, Pee Wee, Anderson. You see little things the referee does that makes a match better. And it fascinates me, though, because you did, like I said, you had to work around all the plunder and all the other crap, and there was you couldn't fake a count out because basically you'd be like, 1, 2, all right, let me just go out here and talk to you guys. It was just amazing,
Terry Funk actually called me one time the best referee for a company that doesn't need a referee. Now, I don't know if that was a backhanded comment, but I said thank you.
Well, I mean, hey, anytime Terry Funk tells you something that has the word best in it, you just go home and you say, Terry Funk said I was the best.
Right, exactly.
So, again, folks, I'm thrilled by this, and the fact that you were able to come on the show just makes me giddy like a schoolgirl. I want to go ahead and again mention OTW, Old Time Wrestling. OldTimeWrestling.net. Again, I want to point out you have shows May 11th at 2 p.m. And I want to make sure Fan Appreciation Day is May 18th. You have shows at 2 and 7.
Actually, Fan Appreciation Day is the 11th. And
so that's...
And the 18th is a two-part tournament. We do it every year called Soul Survivor. And the preliminaries are at 2, and then the finals, plus a bunch of other matches are at 7 o'clock. But the idea behind Soul Survivor is we just have 2 buckets with the guys' names in it, the 2 locker rooms, because our locker rooms are separate.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, the guys aren't in the same locker room.
Oh, that makes sense.
What we do is we have the fans, we pick fans out of the crowd, and they pick a name out of the bucket, and this fan picks a name out of that bucket, and that's the matchup.
So it's a single, it really is kind of like the single, not a tag team, but it reminds me of the whole lethal lottery, which I actually like the lethal lottery. Yeah, so I mean, but they're picking the opponents.
Yep, and we'll whittle it down till there's 4 guys left, and then the 4 guys that night will go do semifinals and a final, and Soul Survivor himself will go up against our champion that night. So if you win the Soul Survivor, you're working hard that day.
Nice.
And then we shut down for the summer. We'll do one show in the summer, and then we'll start up again after Labor Day with weekly shows, Saturdays at 2 o'clock. So if you want a place to learn, a place to work, OTW is a good place because we've probably done 40 shows a year.
And you know what? I'm not going to – and here's the thing, folks. I recently just discovered OTW, but the more I look into it, it looks like an organization I would work for and I would believe in and I'd promote. And, I mean, honestly, Jim, this looks like something people should get involved in. And I'm looking at it, and the prices are phenomenal, $5 for kids, $10 for adults. I mean, I've been to some shows, it's $20 just to get in the door, and if you want a better seat, they're going to charge you for that. This is actually great. So
I have 3 reserved seats every week for this guy who brings his daughter and her friend every week. They're the only reserved seats I have every week. And, you know, it's just a fun time. It's a family-oriented show. We're not crazy, no light bulbs and cables and all that. I'm too old for that stuff. Plus, I'd have to clean it up anyway. But we only run in our building. It seats 75 to 100 people at the most. And it's just a good way for guys who are moving up to learn. And we got a lot of guys outside of our own students who come in and work for us and love it because it's a great learning experience. So, I mean, indie guys who are out there in the Northeast and, you know, think they want to give it a try, check out the website and see what you think and get in touch with us. I'm not the booker. I'm not the, I promote it, but I don't have the book, so don't yell at me if you don't get a call back.
So you folks, you heard that. Make sure you yell specifically at Jim. Make sure you tell him that it's all his fault because you're not booked on the show. Okay, just tell him.
Hey, that won't be the first time. That's not the first time I've been blamed for something going wrong in wrestling.
Me and you both, brother. I literally could. So there's certain promoters I could look at wrong, and they'd blame me for not doing something. So this has been a lot of fun, and my intentions are hopefully, sir, that you come back on another day and we just talk in general where the business is at and what's happening. But this has been one of those interviews that people will absolutely listen to. Folks, it'll be available on iTunes this week. Also, the Stitcher app, you can listen to it here, and also the link will be on Hype is Wrestling on Facebook and the other show we do, Hype is Here Radio. This has been a lot of fun, sir, and obviously big fan, somebody I admire in the business, and I'm proud guys like you in the business keep my business fair still because, like I said, it does take a good referee to have a good match, and every match I've seen you referee has been great. So thank you very much, sir, for what you've done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. And if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, I don't Facebook, but if you want a Twitter, it's Jim Molineaux, and Molineaux is Molineaux. Easy enough. You hear me be a smart ass every once in a while, but that's about it. A daily song.
Yes, there you go. And folks, I'm going to go ahead and tap into that. I will retweet and promote his Twitter account if you follow me, Hype is Radio. So make sure you follow me, and then you can follow Jim because I will make sure, because, you have a different last name. I'll make sure people find you, sir.
That's great. Help me get to 409 followers.
Well, me and you are right there together, brother. I can't quite get over that hump either, and I talk on the radio every week. It's kind of sad. But, sir, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on. Thank you so much for being candid and honest, and I look forward to hopefully having you again soon, okay?
Oh, thanks for having me. Like I said, it's great to talk wrestling. I love it. And, it gets in your blood. You can't get it out, and this helps release it sometimes.
Absolutely, sir. As much as I think about leaving the business, I never will because in the end, we're in this business for one reason. We just simply love it. So
yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, again, one of the best referees that I've seen, Jim Molineaux. Thank you for coming on, sir.
Thanks.
Bye. Folks, that was just an amazing interview. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up because really, how do you follow it up? Jim Molineaux, again, and I legitimately think that Jim Molineaux is one of those referees that probably doesn't get the credit he deserves because of the whole ECW stigma. However, I think that he could go work for the WWE right now and make their product better, or even go work with guys down in, the independents and FCW, whatever. But folks, thank you very much for listening to Hype is Wrestling Radio. Like us on Facebook, Hype is Wrestling. If you have any feedback, please message me, call me. Just do whatever you have to do to let me know how the show went. I want to thank you very much for listening. If you're listening on download, make sure you share the show, Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio, and again, iTunes this week, folks. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Adam MainMan Carey. Hype is Radio on Twitter. Folks, thank you for listening.